Nathan had lived in the Crestwood apartments for 2 years, long enough to memorize the worn-out carpet patterns in the hallways and the flickering lights that buzzed faintly overhead. The building was old and somewhat decrepit, a tall, looming structure that housed the restless, the struggling, and the quiet wanderers of the city. But despite its age and wear, Crestwood had an unusual charm, a sense of mystery that kept Nathan hooked. It was the red door that intrigued him most. Apartment 7A, on the 7th floor, was the only one with a red door in the entire building. In a sea of chipped beige, it stood out, glaringly bright, like a bloodstain on a dull canvas. No one in the building could remember when they first noticed it, and no one had ever seen anyone come or go. There were whispers among the tenants, rumors of a haunted past or a superstitious landlord, but mostly, the red door was a peculiar fixture, a strange sight everyone ignored but couldn't quite forget. Nathan often found himself pausing in front of it during his late-night walks. His girlfriend Tori called them his thinking walks, moments when he would wander aimlessly, trying to process his aimless job, their strained relationship, or just the general unease that had settled into his life like a thick fog. On one such night, he found the door drawing him in again. The light in the hallway buzzed overhead, casting a dim glow over the bold, unmarked red. As he stood there, a soft giggle broke the silence. Nathan turned to see a little girl standing at the end of the hallway, half hidden in the shadows. She was small, dressed in a white nightgown that looked oddly outdated, and her hair hung in loose curls over her shoulders. She stared at him with wide, dark eyes, unblinking. "Do you know what's behind the red door?" she asked, her voice soft but carrying an unsettling echo. Nathan felt a chill run down his spine. He'd never seen this girl before, and he knew most of the building's residents. She was out of place, like a misplaced puzzle piece. "No," Nathan replied, unsure why he was even talking to her. "Do you?" The girl's lips curled into a knowing smile. "Maybe you should find out. Maybe it's what you've been looking for." Nathan blinked, and when he opened his eyes, the girl was gone. He glanced up and down the hallway, but it was empty. He wondered if he'd imagined her, a product of his fatigue and ever-wandering thoughts. But the red door remained, daring him, pulling him closer. Against his better judgment, he raised his hand and knocked. The sound echoed loudly in the stillness, followed by a tense silence. For a moment, Nathan thought nothing would happen. But then, the door creaked open slowly, revealing a familiar sight. It was his apartment, or at least, it looked like it. The layout was identical, but everything was subtly different. The walls were a brighter shade of white, the furniture was newer, and everything seemed perfectly arranged. As if plucked straight from a design magazine, it was a version of his home without the clutter, without the imperfections. There was no chipped paint, no threadbare rug, no dishes piled in the sink. It was his dream of what his apartment should be. Nathan's curiosity overtook his hesitation. He stepped inside. The door shut behind him with a resounding thud, and the air seemed to thicken as if the room itself was breathing. Nathan turned, expecting to see the door still there, but instead, he found a seamless wall. The red door had vanished, replaced by a blank, unremarkable surface. He reached out, his fingers brushing against the cold plaster, but there was no handle, no sign that a door had ever been there. A rising sense of dread crept over him, but before he could react, a soft voice called his name. "Nathan?" He turned to see Tori standing in the doorway of the bedroom, looking exactly as she did on a normal day. Casual, beautiful, but somehow more. Her features were sharper, her smile wider, her presence more radiant. She walked over to him, placing a hand on his cheek. "You're home early," she said sweetly. "Everything okay?" Nathan stared at her, at this perfect version of his girlfriend, and his mind spun with confusion. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real, but she felt solid, warm against his skin, and the apartment smelled like fresh coffee and vanilla. Tori's favorite scents. I don't know how I got here, Nathan stammered. The red door, Tori tilted her head, a look of mild confusion crossing her face. Red door? What are you talking about? You're just tired, babe. Come, sit with me. She led him to the couch and he sat down, the cushion softer than he remembered. It felt like his apartment, but better. Everything was better. He couldn't explain the unease that gnawed at him. He should have felt comforted, but the perfect apartment felt like a stranger's home, a polished replica of the flawed reality he knew. Nathan glanced around, searching for something out of place, something that would explain this strange shift. That's when he saw the little girl again, peeking out from behind the bedroom door. Her eyes were still fixed on him, wide and expectant. What's going on? Nathan whispered, half to the girl, half to himself. The girl smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. You found it, now you're inside. Before Nathan could question her further, Tori's voice pulled his attention back. She was talking, laughing about some inside joke they had shared months ago, but her words felt muffled, distant. He tried to focus on her, but his mind kept drifting back to the little girl. Who is that? Nathan asked, pointing towards the girl. Tori followed his gaze, but her expression didn't change. There's no one there, Nathan. Nathan blinked and the girl was gone. Panic bubbled up inside him and he stood abruptly. He needed to leave. He needed to find the door, but there was nothing, just the walls of this perfect prison. I have to go, Nathan muttered, pacing the room. I need to get out. Tori's demeanor shifted, her once warm smile turning cold and unreadable. Why would you want to leave? Isn't this everything you've ever wanted? Nathan looked at her, really looked at her and saw the subtle differences. The way her eyes seemed too bright, her movements too smooth. This wasn't Tori. It was a version of her, an idealized, sanitized mimicry. He rushed to the wall where the door had been, frantically running his hands along the surface, searching for any seam, any sign of escape. The wall remained stubbornly solid. He pounded his fists against it, the sound dull and unyielding. "Let me out!" he shouted, but his voice echoed back at him, swallowed by the room. Behind him, Tori watched silently, her face expressionless. Nathan turned to confront her, but she was no longer looking at him. She was staring past him at the front door, his front door, the one that now stood in place of where the red door should have been. The door swung open, and Nathan's breath caught in his throat. A man stepped inside. He was dressed in Nathan's clothes, carrying Nathan's keys and wearing Nathan's face. The double walked in with an easy, practiced stride, as if he belonged, and Nathan realized with growing horror that he did. This was his replacement. "Hey, Tori," the double said casually, tossing his keys on the table. Tori smiled, her warmth returning in an instant as she greeted the new Nathan. The real Nathan stood frozen, watching as his life unfolded in front of him. Perfect, without him. He tried to speak, to scream, to assert his presence, but his voice was lost, swallowed by the room that no longer recognized him. The little girl's words echoed in his mind. "Maybe it's what you've been looking for." But Nathan hadn't been looking for this. He hadn't asked to be replaced, to be erased. He pounded on the walls again, desperation fueling his every move, but it was useless. The room was a cage, and he was the prisoner. The double glanced at Nathan, just once, with a faint, almost pitying smile. It was a look that said everything without a single word. Nathan was trapped, and the double was free. The perfect apartment was now the perfect trap, and there was no way back. Nathan could only watch as the life he once knew unfolded without him, with a version of himself that was everything he wished he could be. As the evening wore on, Nathan slumped to the floor, exhausted and defeated. Tori and the double laughed together, a harmonious duet of stolen moments. And in the corner, the little girl reappeared, watching him with those dark, unblinking eyes. "Why are you doing this?" Nathan asked, his voice cracking. The girl's smile widened, her teeth unnaturally white against the darkness of her face. "You knocked, and now it's your turn." She faded into the shadows once more, leaving Nathan alone in his perfect, inescapable nightmare. The laughter of the double and Tory echoed around him, a mocking reminder of the life that was no longer his, and the red door, though nowhere to be seen, remained ever present, a silent witness to Nathan's eternal confinement, and a grim warning to anyone who might be foolish enough to knock again.